Australians come together to commemorate Anzac Day in a different way, as large services are cancelled due to coronavirus restrictions. A man dies after contracting COVID-19, bringing Australia's death toll to 80. Beachgoers told to go home. The New South Wales Health Minister expresses his disappointment at people flouting physical distancing rules. And the mystery over Kim Jong-un's health deepens, with China dispatching a team of doctors into North Korea. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Gemma Veness. An intimate national commemorative service has been held at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra today, with the official dawn service cancelled due to the coronavirus outbreak. Tom Lowry reports.
It is a very different Anzac Day here at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. Ordinarily, as many as 35,000 people would gather on Anzac Parade for the dawn service in the stillness and blackness of an Anzac Day morning in the ACT. But today, just a handful of Australia's most senior dignitaries gathered for a commemorative service inside the War Memorial itself. The context wasn't ignored by the occasion. Many noted how the values that Anzac Day represents are so relevant during today's COVID-19 pandemic, those of unity and coming together as a nation in a time of crisis. The Prime Minister also reflected upon the reality that this isn't the first Anzac Day to be held during a global pandemic, thinking back to the 1919 Spanish flu, also reflecting on a small Anzac Day dawn service held on the shores of Gallipoli and what can be learned from that service that we can bring into today.
There was no pomp at that little service. There were no dignitaries, no bands, just the sound of lapping water on a lonely shore. One said of that little service, it was the real thing. And so our remembrances today, small, quiet and homely, will be.
Only some of the country's most senior dignitaries came along for this morning's service. The Governor-General, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, Anthony Albanese, the High Commissioner of New Zealand, the Chair of the Australian War Memorial and representatives from both Legacy and the RSL, along with a number of veterans there to represent their communities too. It was a small, intimate and sombre occasion, but also a special one during today's times.
People across Australia are commemorating Anzac Day at home, with public services and marches cancelled. It's the first time since 1919 that Anzac Day events have been disrupted. Australians have found other ways to remember the Anzacs. Kathleen Calderwood has more.
Here in southwestern Sydney, we've had the privilege this morning of experiencing a truly Australian Anzac Day service. Local Vietnam veteran Peter McFarlane decided to put on a dawn service for the members of his community. About 40 people turned out to this cul-de-sac here in Ingleburn to hear the service. It had all the essentials. Mr McFarlane read the ode, he played the last post and the reveille, and he also played the two national anthems, but his own personal touch was to include We Are Australian by the Seekers, and this is why he did that.
I think it's the best song that ever been written by an Australian. I really do. To me, it typifies Australia. I'm part Aboriginal, and in this street, as I said in my speech, that there's 10 different nationalities in this street of 16 homes. So it just says everything about Australia, what we are, where they come from and all the rest.
At the end of the service, the locals handed out Anzac biscuits to everyone. And of course, this is a truly unique Anzac Day with no public services this year because of the coronavirus pandemic and social distancing. So really, for people living in this community who are doing self-isolation, it was a nice opportunity to get out and talk to their neighbours and remember that community spirit that they might be missing. This is just one of thousands of streets and driveways, lounge rooms where people today have paid their respects and marked this day of remembrance.
A commemorative service organised at the last minute has been held in Darwin this morning. It's been a very subdued Anzac Day for the city, which was once on the front line of the Second World War. Many veterans and members of the public have been stopping to pay their respects in their own time, with gatherings of more than 10 people still banned across the Northern Territory. Melissa McKay is in Darwin.
Darwin is a military city. Thousands of Defence Force personnel live and work across the top end. The Army's 1st Brigade is based here. It's the Ready Brigade for 2020, meaning it's the first to deploy if necessary. And of course, in 1942, the city itself was bombed the day the Second World War came to Australian shores. There is quite a rich military past and present here in Darwin, which makes days like Anzac Day just that bit more moving. Though we didn't see the crowds that we would normally expect at the cenotaph this morning, a short 5-minute service was held at dawn with the last post ringing out and wreaths laid by the handful of veterans who attended at sunrise. Since then, we've seen small groups of members of the public pass through and pay their respects in their own time, taking a moment to reflect on the sacrifices made by the servicemen and women before us. Elsewhere in the Northern Territory, the RSL in Alice Springs pre-recorded its services and played them out on social media this morning. We saw thousands of Territorians on their driveways and balconies this morning lighting a candle to pay their respects in their own time.
A man has died after contracting coronavirus in Tasmania's northwest. His death brings Australia's toll to 80, with more than 6,600 cases nationwide. Taking a look at the states and territories, New South Wales has recorded 12 new cases today, bringing the state's total to just under 3,000. 3 people were diagnosed overnight in Victoria. The state's total is 1,346. Western Australia has seen 1 new case today, bringing its total to 549. The ACT also confirmed 1 extra case for a total of 106. Queensland, South Australia, the Northern Territory and Tasmania haven't recorded new infections. Experts say an explosion of coronavirus cases in Tasmania's northwest should serve as a warning to the rest of the country about the risk of outbreaks as the number of recorded cases plateaus. Investigations into the outbreak are continuing, but there are warnings such a cluster could occur anywhere if measures are rolled back too quickly.
Last month, Tasmania was ahead of the game. The island at the bottom of the world had acted quickly against the threat of coronavirus.
It was very encouraging that Tasmania moved swiftly to establish control over its borders and to cut down travel into the state.
The dream of an island cut off from the pandemic was soon shattered.
A Tasmanian hospital is now in the grips of a coronavirus outbreak.
Tasmania's first death was a Ruby Princess cruise ship passenger who died at the Burnie Hospital. More cases soon emerged, including dozens of hospital workers and patients. As the rest of the country experienced a gradual flattening, Tasmania's cases kept growing, with the northwest becoming a pandemic hotspot. 2 hospitals were shut down and the Defence Force was called in. Lyndon Hunter is among 5,000 locals in quarantine because his wife is a hospital worker.
I think Tasmanians would probably expect it to be one of the last places, to be honest. We're on an island state, it's small.
Tasmania has had one of the lowest testing rates in the country, and the northwest's older population made it a high-risk area. But experts say it's an example of how quickly an outbreak could happen anywhere, especially if states and territories wind back restrictions or testing too soon.
Bill Botell was an architect of Australia's response to the HIV/AIDS epidemic.
As long as the virus remains in Australia, we will be susceptible to these outbreaks and clusters.
Professor of Epidemiology Mary Louise McLaws says any relaxing of restrictions needs to be informed.
It needs to be very careful and very slow, but it really shouldn't be done until there's proactive testing in the community.
Leaving a long road ahead. Ellen Coulter, ABC News.
New South Wales Health Minister Brad Hazzard has expressed his disappointment in people who ignored social distancing rules on Sydney beaches. Clovelly, Coogee and Maroubra beaches were temporarily opened for exercise this morning. The beaches could only be accessed from 6 to 9 o'clock after people flouted restrictions which led to their closure yesterday. The beaches are closed again and Randwick Council will reassess the situation on Monday.
I have to express as New South Wales Health Minister a degree of disappointment and agitation about the fact that some people, when the rules are relaxed, when we try and do the right thing by giving people an opportunity to have some outside exercise, that people are disregarding the very strong message of social distancing.
There are growing questions about the health of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, with China sending a medical team given conflicting reports on his condition after surgery. China correspondent Bill Birtles reports from Beijing.
A defector site earlier this week reported that Kim Jong-un underwent some sort of surgery. The speculation is that it was a heart procedure. This was reported by one source on a defector website. The US network CNN, citing an American intelligence source, reported this. It's been very confusing over the past few days because, first of all, the South Korean government appeared to reject those reports, saying that there was nothing abnormal that it was detecting from North Korea. Then President Trump himself said he believed CNN's report was fake news, only for the US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, to yesterday say, look, we don't actually have any information, but we are monitoring it very closely. Now, with what appears to be confirmation that a Chinese medical team has flown to North Korea, we have very good reason to believe it is not business as usual. But the reports from people in Pyongyang say that so far there's nothing abnormal about the city itself. And although I haven't had a chance yet today to go down to the North Korean embassy here in Beijing, when I did go past, I go past it nearly every day, it's near the ABC bureau, there's no additional security presence from the Chinese side.
Is this trip then likely to shed any more light on Kim Jong-un's condition?
You would imagine that the Chinese government now is coming under pressure to at least explain domestically what is going on, because as I said, the rumour mill here in Beijing is absolutely in overdrive. The reason there's so much speculation is that unverified screenshots have been circulating on the Chinese internet, supposedly from Chinese medical doctors who have been leaking information. Now, I'm not going to go too much into what those rumours are saying because it is just pure speculation and it's not verified. But you now have not just outside China, but a huge amount of people in China asking its own government, is this true? What's going on? So we expect in the coming days to find out. You do have to remember when Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, died, there was no lead-up. It was a sudden announcement. So whether Kim Jong-un is in a bad condition after surgery, whether he's okay, or whether the situation's even worse than that, it wouldn't be surprising that there is a huge degree of secrecy about it initially. The question is now, Gemma, when are we going to actually hear from an official source about what's going on?
The coronavirus death toll in the US is now more than 50,000, according to data from Johns Hopkins University. The country has by far the highest death toll in the world, and the number of confirmed infections is approaching 900,000. It comes as some states have begun lifting lockdown measures and reopening businesses closed to stop the spread of the virus. President Donald Trump has been under increasing pressure over his handling of the pandemic, with critics saying it's too early to lift restrictions.
Half of all Americans live in states that have now taken steps to open their economies. Just yesterday, Governors Gavin Newsom, California, Tim Walz of Minnesota, and Bill Lee of Tennessee announced additional plans to restart certain sectors. We ask every American to maintain vigilance and hygiene, social distancing, and voluntary use of face coverings. We're opening our country. It's very exciting to see. We have a lot of talent involved, from governors down to people that just stand there and help you with the doors. There's been tremendous talent involved and tremendous spirit from our country. The country is a great place, and it's going to be greater than ever before. I really believe that. I think there's going to be a tremendous upward shift.
Meantime, world leaders have pledged more cooperation to speed up the search for a coronavirus vaccine. In a global summit via video link, they've also promised to ensure all countries have equal access to treatment. Nick Dole reports from London.
Here in the UK, the death toll continues to rise, up another 768 in the last 24 hours, and that doesn't include care homes. Those sorts of figures really do underscore the urgent global need to find either a vaccine or some sort of a treatment for the coronavirus, which has killed close to 200,000 people. The World Health Organization has held a global summit via video conference. The French President Emmanuel Macron, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the acting UK leader Dominic Raab were among those participating, along with leaders from Europe, Africa and the Americas. They've promised a better system for sharing information about potential treatments and vaccines, and they've also pledged to ensure that all countries have access to those treatments when they're found, not just the wealthy nations who can afford them.
In order to counter COVID-19, we need vaccines, effective treatments and fast and reliable tests. We need them soon. And most importantly, everybody needs them.
The United States wasn't represented in this conference. US President Donald Trump has, of course, been critical of the World Health Organization, accusing it of being China-centric, and he's said that he'll be suspending funding. But the WHO chief has defended his organization and the way that it's responded to the crisis.
Since January, WHO has been working with thousands of researchers all over the world to accelerate and track vaccine development, from developing animal models to clinical trial designs and everything in between.
Vaccine trials are already underway globally. Here in the UK, human trials on a vaccine began yesterday, and the UK will host another global virtual summit next month with the aim of raising around $14 billion for the global scientific effort.
New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has led Anzac Day tributes from the driveway of Premier House in Wellington. For the first time since the Gallipoli campaign in 1915, there was no formal service in New Zealand due to coronavirus restrictions. Instead, Ms Ardern, along with thousands of Kiwis, gathered outside in quiet contemplation at dawn. The PM was joined with her partner, Clark Gayford, and Father Ross Ardern. For the first time, the Governors-General of Australia and New Zealand have recorded a joint video message for Anzac Day. They've noted that despite there being no public events this year, people can commemorate from home. Governor-General David Hurley says it's important to acknowledge the efforts of former and current Defence Force members.
At a time when staying connected has never been more important, Dame Patsy and I, on behalf of our respective nations, bring you this joint Anzac Day message.
Kia ora koutou, greetings to you all. On this very different Anzac Day, David and I acknowledge the enduring bonds forged between our two countries by the Anzacs at Gallipoli.
On Anzac Day, we remember and honour the service and sacrifice of those who have served our nations.
This year, Gallipoli will not be a place of pilgrimage. The last post will not echo across Anzac Cove, nor at Lone Pine, nor Chunnock Bear. There will be no visitors to the memorials and cemeteries on Gallipoli. No expeditions up the steep ravines and ridgelines where our forebears fought and died. There will be no public gatherings in our towns and cities, and no opportunities for us to stand side by side to honour our veterans and pay homage to those who lost their lives in times of war.
But many of us can still participate in an act of remembrance. We know that in thousands of homes across Australia and New Zealand, people will come together in spirit to honour the service and sacrifice of those who have served. Acts of remembrance, of course, are very much a personal thing. Whatever way you choose to remember, Anzac Day is a time to acknowledge those who have died in service to our nations, to reflect on how that service and sacrifice has contributed to what and who we are as nations today. That is, to understand its impact, and to understand what our response should be to that legacy.
Along with our friends in Australia, we too will commemorate our Day of Remembrance in a unique way, knowing that on either side of the Tasman, we can draw strength and resolve from the courage and comradeship of our Anzac forebears. We can be guided by their sense of common purpose and the understanding that we all have a part to play in keeping each other safe and well in our current adversity. And that includes reaching out to support the vulnerable and the anxious in our communities. We can choose to do good, to ensure that adversity brings out the best in us. It is in this way that we can best honour the many people who live on in our memories and the sacrifices that they made for our nations.
We remember on Anzac Day for a reason. We are proud of our Anzac forebears. Let us make them proud of us.
Ka maumahara tonu tātou ki a rātou.
Lest we forget.
While we commemorate the men and women who have served our country, we're also being reminded of the contributions animals have made. Nigel Alsop, the CEO of the Australian War Animal Memorial Organisation, says animals play a big part in the war effort.
First of all, let me just mention, obviously 9 million animals died during World War I alone, and that's why we honour them today as well as their own day on the 24th of February each year. But dogs certainly were used in many roles in World War I, from casualty searching for delivering messages so troops didn't have to. First aid dogs carried bandages to the wounded. And of course, the horse, like the famous War Horse movie, that was used not just in a cavalry role, as we know, with our light horsemen as well, but also in a logistics role. Perhaps more horses or equines, such as mules and donkeys, were used in the role of carrying equipment than in any other role itself. And we mustn't forget the humble pigeon, which delivered messages back and forth from headquarters to our troops as well.
And handlers and other servicemen and women would develop a very close relationship with these animals, I imagine.
Absolutely, and indicative right of today, where we, up until recent times, of course, had military working dog handlers serving in Afghanistan in the explosive detection role, as well as general patrol and guard roles. It's amazing what a bond. I think we all perhaps understand, everyone that owns a pet, that it eventually becomes a member of the family, doesn't it? No different to a dog that you're perhaps even more bonded to in a wartime situation. Our own charity supplies funds for both canine and equine PTSD animals. We, with other organisations such as Mates for Mates and Horses for Heroes, we supply funds so veterans are able to just sit in a paddock with a horse, for example, and tell their woes. It's quite an incredible way of therapy. And of course, a dog, man's best friend, it's an understatement. We again supply funds to supply dogs to veterans, ranging from Vietnam to current day, just helping them have a mate, basically, that they can lean on and talk to in distressing times.
And how are these animals recognised and awarded for their service?
Well, they weren't up until quite a recent time. Thankfully, with the aid of many others, our charity, along with other charities, managed to get the government to finally recognise military working dogs, and they now get a medal for their service. And we're hoping to see that backdated right to Vietnam and perhaps even World War II.
Australian expeditioners based in Antarctica are some of the few people allowed to come together for Anzac Day. Australian stations are COVID-19 free and are isolated from the pandemic, meaning social distancing restrictions are not being implemented. The 89 Australians at the research stations paid their respects with services and handmade flagpoles, wreaths and two-up paddles. An ex-military support group that's been forced to close its doors has started a home delivery service taking vital supplies to veterans in isolation. Overwhelmed with orders, help is required to expand the free service to all of the returned servicemen and women in need.
Unable to leave her home, Alice Thunans is receiving a delivery of fresh food and supermarket staples.
Should keep you going for a little while, eh?
The Army veteran is a double amputee and has lost the ability to drive just as COVID-19 struck.
As you can see, I can't sit straight, and
to get into my car and drive up the shop, it's a real big job.
So the delivery, provided by the Ex-Military Rehabilitation Centre, is welcome.
Wow, look at this. That's going to do me for quite some time. I'm over the moon. It's going to set me up for weeks.
Dion Cowdray set up the delivery service after the rehabilitation centre was forced to close its doors. It started small, raising money to buy products from local suppliers.
It all came together, and then once I had it there ready to go, I had trouble finding anybody to deliver it to.
That all changed when his Facebook post was seen by 15,000 people.
It's totally gone a bit gangbusters on the approach of people asking for care packages now.
He's even delivering to veterans living 2 to 3 hours away. It's become a lifeline for ex-servicemen and women, some of whom are doing it tough.
That social isolation really exacerbates any kind of emotional or psychological issues that they might be having.
The care packages also provide a socially distant, friendly face to show them they're not forgotten. The project's early stages were funded by a federal grant, but now it's up to others to keep it going. Helen Frost, ABC News, Adelaide.
Let's take a look at the satellite. A trough and linked front are bringing patchy rain and storms to South and West Australia. Warm northerly winds ahead of the trough are affecting the east of the continent. Persistent westerlies bring showers to western Tasmania, while troughs over the tropics trigger isolated storms. Looking around the country for tomorrow, Queensland will be mostly sunny with very warm conditions in the northeast. Sunny and warm in New South Wales and the ACT, showers in the southeast and the northwest. In Victoria, cool and a few showers over the south, clearing by the afternoon. In Tasmania, windy with showers, with colder temperatures in the south. Cool to cold for South Australia, with clearing showers. For Western Australia, mostly sunny in the southwest, clouds and cool in the south, and sunny and hot in the north. And mostly sunny and hot in the Northern Territory, late showers in Arnhem and sunny and warm over the interior and the south. And looking ahead to Monday's forecast for the capitals, Brisbane will be mostly sunny, possible showers for Sydney, a top of 19 for Canberra, mostly sunny in Melbourne, a possible shower for Hobart. Adelaide will be mostly sunny and a sunny day for Perth and Darwin. And that is the latest from ABC News. I'm Gemma Veness. Stay with us. The World This Week is coming up next.
This justifies the entire dig.
What else you hiding here?
You think meth's behind that murder?
You're the one doing all the talking.
He lays his sins bare so you can see them.
Mystery Road continues tomorrow 8:30, ABC and iView.
This week on News Breakfast, author and raconteur Kathy Lett joins us from London to talk about her latest novel.
And in our latest streaming recommendation, Zach Hepburn will look back at one of the defining movies of the 80s, Desperately Seeking Susan. We'll see you then.